Okay, thank you, Pooja. This is going to be a quick call. I posted a link on the chat with the simplifications we talked about before. Most of them can be just talked over, except Fortress doesn't really have any changes. But the actual change is on the way that is in the payment mechanism that actually needs to be written somewhere concretely instead of hand waving as I did in that document in this HackMD. But the biggest issue is like, how do we want to proceed if we were going to push for inclusion of this? Tim Bako already posted some guidelines as to how to like propose changes on the next forks. And these guidelines are very loose at the beginning of for proposals. It doesn't really require even to have an EIP. This EIP is like fully specified. There are some minor tweaks that are being added, except that thing of the payment mechanism that requires queue on the beacon state. But the full, I mean, the implementation, I envision that it's going to be like slightly changed from what at least Prism and Teku already have. So we already have the consensus spec mostly specified, except these tweaks. We already have 2 clients implementation. We already have an EIP. So, and I don't feel motivated to waste my time on the Python spec, given that most of the EF research is clearly against this EIP. So I don't think it's worth my time to actually go and work in like getting the spec test to pass, getting test vectors out, and so forth. On the other hand, if I am told that some client is actually working on this, then we do want to have static test vectors at least so that we don't waste our time on interrupt, like diagnosing the kind of things that we were diagnosing with Teku because we were just hashing the wrong objects. It would have been much better if we actually had static test vectors at least. So there's this balance that I'm not really sure what is the right balance to it. I just don't want to be wasting time on writing specs if I have like this mountain to climb against EF research to propose this change. So if you guys want, we can go over what are these changes. Let me just share my screen and just put this in view mode, I think, before how do I do this? Let's see. Like this, and now let me just hi Enrico.
Hi.
Let me just let's see. How do I share? There we go. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this screen. These are the simplifications that we're gonna be changing. The first one is the PTC changes. This is much easier to implement, and I think it's a no-brainer. We don't want to be dealing with the complication of like removing bits and so forth. So, and no one actually has implemented this fully because we weren't really considering the attestations on the state. So I think this is going to be easy to remove. Just remove all of the payment. Keep the PTC commitments, the PTC members, the way we are currently taking it from the committee. Just keep it there. Allow them to attest. Give them the attestation reward if they attest, given the penalty if they don't, and don't do anything for the PTC. The proposer is already anyways encouraged to include these PTC attestations. And if clients are really, like if all major clients are hacking their codes to not attest, then we're gonna have to deal with something. But if some forks appear that are just not attesting for these 512 members that are changing every slot, I think it's just fine. It's just like complete intellectual masturbation to give them reward. And anyways, if we're going to reward them to actually prevent some sort of attack on the PTC because of some forked clients, then anyways, the reward mechanism has to be very, very different because one attestation reward is worth any kind of attack anyways. So I propose just not worry at all about like rewards for the PTC. The proposer will include them and remove all of the logic of rewarding the PTC attestations. There's one change. I'm not sure how difficult this is on clients. This is very simple on Prism, so I'm not sure if this is true for every client, which is about the merge view. If we go with the simplified fork choice, there's one thing that we need to change, which is your PTC attestations. You should not consider any attestation that comes after a threshold, let's say 10 seconds. I'll post a document later on, like in a half an hour, about like full timelines. If we go with slot reductions, I think we can actually pressure this also in ePBS. But say 10 seconds for the current slot. So this I presume is easy. If you're getting a PTC attestation over the wire, you validate it, you go zip it. But if it's over 10 seconds, you don't import it yourself unless you're the proposer for next block. If you're the proposer for next block, you include all PTC in your block. And if you're not supposed to even consider these PTC attestations. You're going to consider whatever comes in the block. So that's what merge view mechanism is, and it's very simple. Fork choice doesn't have any change. The only change is remove everything that is about boosts. Already fork choice deals with the fact that you have empty and full slots. So if you've already implemented this in your fork choice that you have, if we finalized if you finalized a few epochs without some payloads, then you already have this. The only thing that you need to remove are the payload boost, the withholding, and the reveal boost, and set the proposer boost back to 40%. Okay, so we get to the actual thing that needs to be written down somewhere, which is the payment mechanism. Because fork choice becomes very simple by removing the boost and just keeping it as it is now. But the payment mechanism needs to change. Today we take the money out of the builder and we put it in the execution and we give it to the proposer when we process the payload header. Now, instead of doing this, we need to put it in a queue. This queue should have the proposer index for that block, the beacon block root, so that we identify which one is the beacon block root. It needs to have the bid, that's the amount that was already deducted from the builder. And it needs to have an amount, which is the total effective balance that attested for that block root. So when you see an attestation on a block for that block root, you just add, and it's a new attestation, you just add the stake that you're seeing from this attestation to that queue. So we keep this queue on the beacon state, which hopefully is going to be empty all of the time. We put this in a queue, and when we process the payload, we remove this from the queue, and we process immediately. If we process the payload, we just process the payment, and we give it to the proposer immediately. So the queue, in the happy case, is always empty. It has one item when you process the execution payload header, and it's removed immediately because you process the payload immediately. In the unhappy case, you haven't processed the payload got reordered. The beacon state keeps these queued blocks for which the consensus block was merged, was processed, but the payload was not processed. So this queue will have, again, the block root, the proposer index, the bid that was deducted from the builder, and the attestation stake. At epoch transition, you go over this queue and you check if the block, for each element in the queue, if the stake that attested for the block was over 40%, then you pay the proposer that bid. And if it was less than 40%, then you give it back to the builder. So it's very simple mechanism that is part of epoch transition. We might want to do this instead of adding one item, we might want to divide in items and then process up to a churn. That kind of complication we're going to do later. And the idea of having a churn is to prevent the builder from attacking the chain by paying himself. Like you propose a block with an AND// validator, you pay yourself like 1,000 ETH. And then with the builder validator, you start attacking the network. And then you just transfer all of your money by the end of the epoch and you get slashed, but you haven't lost your money. These kind of attacks might be prevented by adding a churn. I just don't want to complicate the spec at this stage. Out of that, the only structure change that I remember we agreed is to add the slot to the payroll envelope, and that's it. So these are the changes. And as I said, I'm not motivated to write them in the spec. I promised that I would, but I don't really feel like. And that's the situation now. I don't know if anyone wants to comment something. I already opened the thread on the Magicians Forum to propose this for Glamsterdam, and I will post what are the implications for slot timings in a bit. Just stop sharing. How do I do this?
Can we quickly go over Kim's timeline? Or if you can, like, I guess if you look at this page that he posted, I guess my main question is like I assume this is a headliner EIP, right? And like by what date do we know it's gonna be in versus we basically just give up, like we go work on something else? Because I don't is the yeah, just for my mental model, is the date like July 17 because that says the headliner discussion and finalization is that time. So like by July 17 we'll know, or do you think this will like continue dragging on for a while type of thing? Like,
Talk to the EOF people. I don't know.
but like, I guess another question is, do we need to be like prepared? Is there something else we need to do between like May 26th and June 20? It says like there's discussions and proposals is happening. Like there's like the codes should be focused on that, so it should be on those codes and stuff like that. I don't know. I think the whole post, yeah, I didn't really understand the post. That's why I'm asking. And then because of that, we need to know. Okay, so like at some point, do we need to update the spec? Do we need to update the spec test? Right. Obviously, we don't want to do that too early, like you said. But like, yeah, I don't know. That's just why I'm asking.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know anything about timings. So that's the status. I do not know if we want to invest time in like, I mean, if we are going to work on a second DevNet to actually have all these changes, then I can start implementing this on Prism. I don't mind working on implementation. That's actually something that gives insight into whether or not is difficult or not. So I don't mind implementing all of this. As long as it's still on top of Electra is easy. If we do this on top of Hulu, it's much more complicated. The Bastin, we already presented this on ACD, so it's fine. It's already we can argue that this was already proposed and satisfied.
I have just one question because this is something that's not on top of my head, and I remember I missed a couple of fossil breakout sessions, and the last one that I attended, I think like it was one that you were supposed to present something.
Yeah, and I got wrong the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is always this thing in my head that might be wrong that says delayed execution might have some clash with ePBS.
Yeah, the delayed execution is a proposal to not include ePBS. They're completely they're exclusive. If you include one, no, they're not independent. If you include one, you cannot include the other.
Independent means that is exclusive, mutual exclusive.
Yeah, and if you want to listen how is the implementation of Fossil, in this meeting is very simple. In Fossil meeting is slightly more complicated. But so there are a lot of complications for delayed execution to be compatible with Fossil. Because you're making some validations on the payload and you're attesting, and the payload is already committed when you attest it.
So remember there's require external information that needs to be allowed to validate the fossil set of essentially the set of
and then you might need to like either forbid 7002 transactions, or you need to do some black magic or to execute part of it to actually check that the delegator actually can pay. But on ePBS, this is actually very simple. The problem is on on the timelines that get pushed a little. But the implementation of Fossil from the ePBS point of view is very simple. What you do is you just simply include in the bid. The builder already has the block. So what it does, it includes in the bid a bid mask of what are the inclusion lists from the inclusion list proposers that he's satisfying. So then the block already commits to satisfying a bunch of inclusion lists. And then the attesters that already have this inclusion list compare this bid mask again. This is part of Fossil, not part of ePBS. So the attesters now don't get the payload. They only get the block, the execution block, but the execution block promises them to satisfy a bunch of inclusion lists. So the attesters now enforce their view of the inclusion list mechanism. So they only attest on a block that promises to satisfy the corresponding inclusion lists.
Yeah.
And then when you validate the payload, if the payload does not satisfy them, it's invalid. That doesn't change from Fossil. So Fossil already has this mechanism. It's just that now you only invalidate the payload and not the block. The block is still committed. It has a bit mask. It doesn't matter. But the payload is not committed. So that's why Fossil is very simple from the point of view of ePBS. Does this clarify your question, Enrico?
Yeah, sure.
Do you need more detail?
No, I guess it's a matter of doing some comparison between ePBS and delayed execution.
Yeah,
in terms
I don't
of
really
complexity.
Yeah, I'd be very happy if actually people look at this, because it's a no-brainer that delayed execution is much more complex. It's just like an entire different game. So as long as more people are actually looking on this, it's obvious the difference.
Yeah, that's a missing point that probably is required to actually then steer the core devs to one place or the other.
I'd be happy if people actually start looking at this, because it's obvious. The complexity of delayed execution is just orders of magnitude worse. The argument is that it doesn't touch for choice, but the for choice changes are minimal. The big changes is on the engine API, which is the biggest problem. This is where all the bugs are.
Yeah, we should take a closer look, definitely.
The main two differences with delayed execution, I mean, the main 2 points in which ePBS is much better. Well, first, it's much less complex. Fossil is immediate, and it doesn't involve the EL. You just do this completely on the CL side. You can actually test it only on the CL side. And the other big difference is in broadcasting. Delayed execution does not allow you to remove the payload and the blobs from the hot path, which is the scaling property that we want. We want to be able to broadcast blobs, more blobs, and larger blocks, and don't care about the time nor the bandwidth to broadcast them. So delayed execution allows you to execute later, but it doesn't allow you to not get the payload and the blobs before the attestation deadline. So those are the main 2 points. All right, so I didn't want to take too much time. I just wanted to inform this, that, I mean, this is out there, this document is there. I don't really want to work on the spec. If you guys tell me that you're going to continue working on implementation, then I'll start and just actually change the implementation in Prism and have it ready so that we can actually interop again. Otherwise, I'm happy to just put this on the freezer until there's a decision on ACD, but I don't want to waste more time. I'm not even coming to ACD, actually,
So are there other clients interested in implementing? Because
I don't really know. So Nimbus told me that they had people working on them, but then they never, I've looked at the branch and I haven't seen any push in that branch. And Lodestar expressed this concern about like a field disappearing from the state, that would, from the block, and that would be a problem for them. But again, there wasn't any commitment to even start working on this, so I don't know. I haven't been contacted by any team.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to freeze, also because there are no much progress on the other clients. The only thing that makes on the technical side, you mentioned that the coupling between attestation and PTC. So you're kind of removing the rewards based on the action, and I was thinking, yeah, I don't like, generally speaking, having some duties that doesn't have any.
I understand, just like sync committees.
Yeah, it's.
But on the other hand, the attack surface is such that, I mean, if there will be an attack, because some clients will just decide, okay, I don't care about this, I'm not going to send these PTC attestations. And let's suppose that this happens, and this is generalized, and you want to prevent it, because this is a malicious behavior.
If it starts happening immediately from one slot to another from the whole network, which is an edge case, obviously, is we start not having PCT anymore. And the consequences of these.
So the consequence of not having PTC means that the next proposer can actually reorder the payload. If he wants, he can reorder the payload.
So the protection, the builder protection goes away somehow.
Yes, because that's correct. The payload wasn't there. So if the proposer decides to reorg it, then the block was heavily attested, and then the payload will be
the chain
not committed.
will follow the reorged one without having any reason to not do that.
Exactly. So if malicious behavior like this arises, then and you think that it can be prevented by actually giving rewards to the PTC, then you need to give it much more reward than just a single attestation. And then we're in this situation where these 512 members that are changing every single slot need to get a lot of reward.
Yeah.
And then this is even worse than any kind of UX for any validator. So I think it's just better not to give any sort of reward. For the sync committee, it was different because the sync committee is something that requires hooking into a particular network in a particular subnet. It requires you to register in advance. You're there in that committee for over a day and so forth. But this thing is only one slot and it's on a global topic, so it doesn't really require you to do anything.
Yeah, you're not wasting so many resources by doing that, essentially.
You already need to be listening to the payload anyways, for the payload anyways.
Exactly. Yeah, I see the argument.
So I think it's just adding complication is just useless. I did add it originally because people were complaining that this would be without some other sync committee situation, but I think it's just much cleaner not to have any rewards, and also allow the thing to attest, because removing it from the attestation committee was the biggest problem.
Yeah, the complication of separating the two sets, excluding a subset of the attestation, so that code path goes away.
Yeah, all of this goes away. It's much simpler. Just keep the attestation as it is. Just take out the commit, the PTC, the way we do.
Yeah, in terms of simplicity, makes total sense. The theoretical thing that you have to do something without any, even if that something is essentially not that heavy from what you have to do, is anyway something that could be argued against.
Yeah, I mean, anyways, if we come to that sort of argument, it doesn't matter because that's easy to change. I think the biggest problem here is going to be that we're up to against a mountain, which is delayed execution itself.
Yeah.
Which is mesmerizing to me. I just honestly don't really understand what are the forces behind this. All right. Okay, so then I'll keep it as this. I'm not going to work on anything. If I work on anything on ePBS, it's going to be on the Prism side on implementing this. And if I have time and will at some point, I'll just update the spec, but I don't even promise that. All right. Okay, no other comments? No questions? Stefan opened his mic, but then he closed it.
Oh no, I don't have any.
Okay. All right, guys. See you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.